and so at the same time, that is not. That makes them
They
look
were
stupid.
at a conference for UFOs.
Yes.
That's the Best Western?
No, it was a very fancy hotel.
I thought it was a hotel.
No, it was very, very fancy.
Okay.
I have been inundated with UFOs the past 2 weeks. I'm so fucking excited to finally get this idea out of my brain. Christmas is over. Jesus Christ may have been an alien. He may have been some form of hybrid, or he was the last true human bloodline that would help fight against the normal compatibility. They were raised by the reptilian. We're not going to get into that right now.
What chapter of the Bible was that in?
I think the one that's the chapter 1, verse 3 of farts. But the Gulf Breeze UFO sighting series happened in 1987 around Christmas time. So actually, it's very appropriate to do it at this time.
Is this our version of a holiday episode?
I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
So the Gulf Breeze sightings were a series of UFO encounters that were centered around a 40-year-old family man named Ed Walters that occurred in and around the small town of Gulf Breeze, Florida, from November of 1987 till May of 1988.
May 1st, 1988, when I was 4 years old.
Isn't that
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the sightings happened on January 19th, my 5th birthday.
It's all coming together. I get the feeling this guy wears socks with sandals. Doesn't he seem like a socks with sandals kind of guy?
This is definitely a guy who's got those pants that like are cargo shorts, but also pants, but have the zipper to like them shorts.
It's perfect because in the wintertime, they're pants. You get it.
Now, while many claim to have debunked this story completely and thoroughly,
Yes.
we feel it is important and a hell of a lot more fun to cover it in its entirety from both sides, starting with Ed's own account from his book, The Gulf Breeze Sightings.
Him and his wife's book, Francis, they wrote it together. The part of that I think
Hello.
helps validate his story is that he had somebody that co-witnessed a lot of this shit, who also possibly was just witnessing her husband have a prolonged mental breakdown after faking a bunch of UFO sightings, and then possibly then getting abducted for real, which I think is the story.
I think this is cute though. Couples need things to grow over, to bond over.
Yeah, exactly.
Writing a book is possibly one of those things.
It could be that she's a witness, it could be that she's an accomplice. We don't know.
We don't know, but in the end, what is the difference between witness and accomplice? You're quote unquote. How else is he debunk this quote unquote? Because you're going to find in the second episode of this series that the debunking is just as dubious as the incidents themselves.
Yeah, well, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, well, we can all talk about what real is and what real is not, and we can have a really long, almost boring conversation about that.
This isn't the Clinton deposition here. Let's not argue what is and what is real and what's not.
So the first sighting came on the night of November 11th, 1987, as Ed was relaxing after a long day at work as a contractor. This guy was very normal. He was a family man. He was a foreman on a construction job. He was a contractor. He had his own business. He was a lot like John Wayne Gacy.
Yes.
I was gonna say that, yeah.
Yes, he did like to have, and it's true, he used to have movie nights where all of the boys in the neighborhood used to come over and they used to watch movies, and they played weird candle games, he called them. But at the same time, I don't think he was a molesty.
No,
I think
no.
that he was, he'd like to imagine he was also still in high school, because those were his glory
I
days.
don't want to delve into what weird candle games are, but at the same time, I don't want to have Marcus have to edit. Yeah, so.
Nothing got stopped. He wasn't making candle hoppers.
Okay, all right.
No, it was a...
This show, by the way, this show has ruined me. They're doing construction on my street right now in Williamsburg, and I looked at all the construction workers digging, and I was
You
just
doing alright?
What are you hiding?
Nick dog.
It's always the boss.
He was a very successful contractor.
Yeah.
His business was really up and coming, but he was a nerd. He was just like a guy that he would like to have kids over, and he was also a bit of a prankster, and he was like the guy that wanted to be cool to the high school.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, as Ed sat in his house, his 10-year-old daughter, 17-year-old son, and wife also at home, Ed noticed a slight movement of light between the limbs of the pine tree that sat in the middle of his front yard.
Now, they were also very close to an Air Force base. I believe it's in Pensacola.
It's a naval base, actually.
It's a naval base, and they have so he's used to seeing lights.
Yeah.
Outside, a lot of military aircraft is going over Gulf Breeze, but he happens to see something that is a little bit brighter and a little bit lighter than he's used to. Kind of like if you accidentally walk in on a Roseanne Barr while she's in the bomb.
Roseanne Barr, Jay.
Good job.
Jay Leno, 1992. Maybe 94 is Jay Leno.
So Ed walked out the front door and saw a glowing, bluish-gray object gliding through the sky like a cloud. Now, Ed rushed back into his house to grab his Polaroid and took the first of dozens of pictures of alien craft.
Now that's what makes this case specific. It's kind of like Billy Meyer, right? Billy Meyer went ahead and he said he saw these UFOs and they gave him special permission to take pictures of them. When you look at those pictures, they're obviously fake.
Yes.
Now these pictures are a little bit better. If they are fakes, they're a little bit better, but what you're going to see now is that this is kind of what this whole case is built on. It's up to, I believe it's 38 pictures that he took of various different locations of different UFOs.
And he took these with a Polaroid camera. Now, for those of you who don't know what a Polaroid camera is, it was very popular in...
That old?
Yeah, no, a lot of kids don't know what Polaroid cameras are.
There's a song about shaking it. Shaking it like a Polaroid. That's an outcast. That's an old reference in itself.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, dude, that song came out well over 10 years ago. That was 2003. That was 13 years ago.
Will Carl Malone ever win a championship? I love Carl Malone.
Yeah, a Polaroid is a camera that would take a picture and you would instantly have that picture. And in these days, a Polaroid picture, you had to peel a film off, whereas later Polaroid pictures, you just had to shake it and eventually the exposure would come into view. But what he was doing is he was taking immediate pictures of these. So there's no time in the dark room.
Because you see, Billy Meyer crafted those pictures by overlaying, doing either double exposure or doing these ideas where he would put these things together in a dark room.
And double exposure is possible on a Polaroid camera. It's just very difficult to do. So back to the...
But also, a Polaroid was obviously used many times to take naughty pictures.
It is the naughty picture.
Thanks, Nate Dog.
If there is a picture that exists of your mother nude,
It is Polaroid.
it is probably a Polaroid.
And if you ever had an opportunity to go to an outhouse, and let's just say you dropped your keys and you're behind the old toilet there, you'll find a stack of your grandmother's old Polaroids, and they are disgusting.
Or you'll hear a whoosh. As a guy who owns the outhouse has been waiting for this moment. He's like, yeah, picture this. Yeah, that'd be $7, so I'm sending it to the newspaper. The newspapers are all clamoring for a picture of your asshole, mister. I know because I had a dream about it.
And that's what happened to the person who was picked up in the beginning of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Damn, $5. It's a good picture.
What's the name of that character?
Chop Top.
Chop.
Yeah, well, he was known as the hitchhiker in the first one, but Chop Top in the second one.
Nice.
But yeah, exactly. That is the kind of picture, that is the kind of camera that he had. So back to the UFO. Ed said that it was a saucer-type craft that seemed as big as a house, but it made no external noise, no hum, no wind, no indication whatsoever that it was actually moving through the sky, nor did it spin like other saucers are said to do.
But it's actually more common with UFO sightings to see it acts like it's dangles.
Yeah.
The way they say it, it looks like it's being hung by a string, which is also the problem with the idea of faking it, which is, because if you're going to fake it, you're going to hang it by a string. But they say they bob, sort of like they're like a top. Which, when you imagine the inside of it is spinning. That's the idea, is that the inside, there's an engine inside of it that is spinning in some way, shape, or form that is an anti-gravitational bullshit machine that just allows it to sort of hop in the sky.
Anti-gravitational bullshit machine.
I'm not a scientist.
Now, in most respects, this is a fairly typical flying saucer. It was dotted with what Ed described as portholes, some lit, some not, and there were horizontal lines surrounding the main body. About the portholes, they're not very clear in the pictures because really Polaroid cameras are kind of shitty. They're not good pictures. They're made for parties. They're made for instant moments. They're not made for precision.
It's a cool ass picture though.
Yeah.
You take a look at it. You just look up at Ed Walters, Gulfbreeze UFO, and you're gonna see a fuck ton. They're good. They're fun.
They are really, really cool pictures.
So the craft had 4 sections. There was a small dome atop the large saucer with a thinner saucer stacked below that, 2 smaller rings of light below that, and finally a large circular light on the bottom that was presumably the anti-gravitational bullshit machine.
But it said it looked like lava. When you looked in the inside of it, it was weird, sort of amorphous, kind of energy ballish kind of thing, like you saw in the middle of like the spacecrafts from Independence Day.
Yeah. And on the top, strangely enough, it had the letters TGIF. Which is, yeah.
And they just dropped all of those twice-baked potato skins down. They shot it in his mouth, and he's like, "That's a flavor sensation."
No, as Ed pulled the camera up to take a second picture, the craft moved in an instant and hovered above him. He said at that moment, his body felt like when a crowd sees fireworks and they all breathe, ah. And at that time, Ed said,
Like when you see a firework?
yeah,
Normally when I see a firework, I'm like, it's a ball! The ball's happening again!
Yeah. Not to segue too much away here, but my grandmother used to watch fireworks with us, and she would stand up, run away, and her pants would fall down. I think I've told that story before.
Well, I mean, actually, what you said is that she stood up and her pants fell down when she was screaming for you to, do well at the basketball game.
Her pants fall down all the time. They fell down when she was sitting at the Baltimore.
Is it a sex secret?
I don't actually know. I
Is
think
that just how a trick she learned in Germany, how to please
no,
soldiers?
this is the American. So she probably learned it in Germany also.
So, he said the feeling on his body was like when the whole crowd goes, but Ed said,
My whole body was screaming, "Oh!"
Very good, Tessa.
Thank you.
Now, suddenly Ed was struck by a blue beam of light. He said it hit him like a compress, slightly squashing him to the ground, just enough to keep him from moving. He tried to scream, but he said the sound was hollow and dead, like a vacuum.
Which I think is really interesting because also he went numb. And the way they describe being numb, like the various abduction scenarios they talk about when the aliens approach them, their whole bodies will go numb, and it feels like that really hard pain, like when your foot goes numb, like full of like pins and needles,
Yeah.
and it's all over your body. So it's really very torturous.
Yeah, it is. And his whole body went numb except for his head. He said the pressure increased. Specifically, his brain felt like it was being squeezed. Not his head. Internally, he said his brain felt like he was being squeezed. And the right side of his forehead, he said it felt like it had a knife stabbing through to the back of his eye socket.
It sounds like he was being sat on by John Panette.
Very good, John. I'm very good, John Panette.
Overweight comedian. Yes.
Yeah, and that spot, that's where he feels pain over and over again. For some reason, Henry, is there a reason why that spot in particular? Is it that hemisphere of the brain
We
that
could talk about this in detail if you want, but
You know what I do want?
there's a follow-up book to the Gulf Breeze sightings book that Ed Walters and Francis Walters wrote, that's called UFO Abductions in Gulf Breeze. It was also written by Ed Walters and Francis Walters.
Yeah.
But what we're going to find out is that he has been abducted several times in his childhood. Really, but that's a whole long story. We're going to find anybody who's seen UFO sightings. A lot of times it runs in the family, or it's a lifelong scenario, and a lot of that is the phantom pain, if you will, of what happens in countless abduction scenarios where a needle is put up the nose into the brain, and there's no reason why.
there's none whatsoever?
I mean, if there is one, the Greys have it, and they're not saying anything because I think it's like the 14th spice on the Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's just something real like, if we told you we would ruin the surprise. What's a surprise plaque? So it'd be like, we're making brain soup. That's a terrible surprise.
It does seem like butt stuff and lobotomies. That's all the aliens come down here to do.
I have a whole theory that I'll go into at some point.
Alright.
Can't wait for that.
Now, Ed estimates that pain lasted for about 20 seconds until it suddenly stopped just as he was being lifted off the ground. He was finally able to properly scream, after which a voice spoke directly into his brain and said,
We will not harm you. He said it sounded like Stephen Hawking.
Huh. Isn't that something?
Please get me out of this chair. I can walk, stand me up, I can walk. JK, it is just a break, I cannot walk.
It's on the floor. We thought you were serious for Stephen Hawking.
Let me closer to the computer, Mike, I have to shit on pants.
No, after Ed screamed again, the voice said,
Calm down, please calm down. You're freaking me out. I know you're freaked out, but at the same time, you're freaking all of us out there.
I don't know if it's offensive or not, but it's a really good impression.
Oh yeah, see,
No, Ed was then hit with a distinct smell. It was a scent that he described as being a combination of ammonia and heavy cinnamon that scorched and stuck to the back of his throat.
and it's also incredibly nauseating. And this is a smell that is, yes, it's true.
Cinnamon? Yeah, ammonia and cinnamon.
Cinnamon. That's an ammonia and cinnamon.
Ammonia and cinnamon?
Yes, it is a common smell linked to grays. People talk about the smell of grays as being like burnt cinnamon all the time. There are things that he says that are details that run through other abduction scenarios that have been said again and again and again. There's a great book called Abductions by Dr. John Mack that says the same shit. All of them talk about they smell like cinnamon, and it's nauseating, and it permeates their clothes. And so it's weird little things that he picks up all the time. Same thing with being numbed. Like, that is a weird, constant thing that the people talk about when being abducted by aliens.
I just can't stop thinking about the Spice Girls auditions and just some like heavy set dude with huge bush hair and a bikini. He's like, I'm ammonia and cinnamon. What's in the group?
Debbie Mazar looks very different these days.
No, as Ed struggled further, the voice slowly said,
Stop it. Stop it. Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself. Why are you hitting yourself? So, again, very true to many abduction scenarios where aliens beg because people are going like, freak out. And aliens will up and be like, stop it, we need to get you into the ship, we're trying to do something with you again. Like, everybody wants to just, I'm like, relax.
and to which Ed replied,
Screw you! This is fun. I love that. It's a totally different person.
Yeah,
That's what I feel like.
you need to be a character.
Screw you!
Isn't it so much better than being yourself?
Yeah, because I didn't actually say screw you.
No, Ed said it.
It is fun.
Yeah, and he said that in a show of bravado that we will all become very familiar with. And it was especially impressive as Ed claims he was now 2 feet off the ground. And the voice then switched to a more pleasant female tone, asking him essentially to relax. And an unpleasant hum started to fill his head, which Ed compared to a hand vibrator being pressed against his skull.
It's a hand
That
vibrator.
was real hand vibrator.
Is that like one of those like head massager things that were just essentially
Migraine makers?
No, you put it in your pussy.
Yeah, I
yes.
think it's a vibrator that slips onto your hand that you can use to give back massages.
It seems like there's a lot of back massage products that look like dicks.
It's 1987. Everything was disguised, but it was all about keeping mommy and daddy together until 1995. And all sex toys that were invented in the late 80s to keep all of our parents together.
Yeah, my mom, well, I'm not going to say it, but it seems like they have balls on them sometimes. They're like, we'll just call it a back massage.
Kids and back massager in the ball part of it, it's called a rest. That's how you rest it upright.
Oh, the city.
Then after that, something really weird happened. Inside his head, Ed started getting visions of dogs. Just dog after dog after dog, like pictures in a book. And each picture came with unintelligible words written underneath.
Were the dogs talking?
Yeah. Yes, it was like Milo and Otis.
Oh my
It was
god.
very cute. Honestly, that is connected to a vision that he had. There's a whole other, in the second episode, we'll get into the various abductions that Ed believes happened to him. And the first one, when he was 7 years old, involves a dog.
Yes, it does. It's very strange. Ed continued to struggle despite the dog pictures, which were presumably meant to calm him down, until finally the aliens just gave up, turned off the blue tractor beam, and dropped Ed from 4 feet up. And after recovering from the initial shock, Ed collected the Polaroids he'd taken and found his wife, who before anything else asked him what the hell that awful smell was.
Yes, and so she went and washed his clothes immediately. And he was like, I got this new fucking stank-ass weed, girl. The nuts are so thick, it makes my eyebrows curl. And she's like, that's great. You know you have a family still.
I think he should have washed his own clothes.
Thank you.
That's very progressive.
It's not the woman's job to wash clothes, it's the laundry machines.
Now, as we're going to see throughout this series, if the Gulf Breeze sightings are real, personally, I think we're dealing with the B-team aliens here, because they don't really seem to be all that good at it. Like, they never get their tractor beam to work, half the time they don't even get the language right, and they get photographed like 30 times.
I have a theory that counters this.
Okay.
That I do believe it extends from the hybrid program that they're trying to build. I think they have a hard time staying in this reality if, in fact, your idea of a quote-unquote conventional alien from a quote-unquote distant star system arrived here in a quote-unquote sort of air machine. Who are they? I'm talking about the aliens.
Oh, they are.
If you do believe that aliens are from another planet, and they come here in a physical machine, and they abduct us, then that's one thing. Then yes, sure, maybe it's BT. Maybe it's the Bad News Bears. And up there, maybe that's where Walter Matthau went when he died. He's on the Hale-Bopp version, but he's surrounded by all these ugly girls.
I'm making
Tiny little...
such a grumpy old man up here.
He's teaching us about love and life. But I do believe that part of the hybrid program, the reason why they're stealing our semens and our eggs and impregnating our women against our will,
Not good.
And then what they're trying to do is they're trying to gain a more strong hold in our reality. They cannot stay in this reality. If they are really truly interdimensional creatures, what they're doing is raping us and making new versions of us that are more stable here. And so these things come through. It's like looking at scrambled cable. Which children that listen to the show also don't understand.
Oh, yeah.
Which is that there used to be a hovering point between like cable channels if you didn't have them, and sometimes you could see a boobie on them if you're looking
The
on
Spice
pornos.
Network.
Yeah, Spice was so good. Playboy too, used to the Jenny McCarthy special.
We can get Playboy in my tablet.
Oh,
Yeah.
porn?
No, good moral people.
Oh, that's what it is. But it's so I think that maybe had something to do with it. We'll get into this further.
So what do they need the bucket to come for?
To make new human/gray babies that can hold a strong, they can be stronger in reality.
Makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. I'm just saying it makes sense so we stop talking about it.
Thank you. You and Natalie do that.
That's good. Well, I think we've learned how to deal with you.
Now, Ed, instead of quietly forgetting the whole thing ever happened, he decided to take the photos to the Sentinel, the local newspaper, but as he was a family man and a local business leader to boot, he decided to submit the photos and the story under the pseudonym Mr. X.
Well, apparently he also brought them to a young kid named Tommy Smith that will go later. We will find that the debunking part of this series was a part of his quote-unquote undoing. Where he said, will you go and bring this to the newspaper for me? And he was like, no, stop talking to me, you 40-year-old man. And he went and he brought them under a pseudonym, saying, like, my friend brought me this to me, Mr. X brought this to me in order to bring it to you because he knows that I have a connection to Dwayne, who was the editor-in-chief. And when those photos came out, it was like fine. It was like a curiosity.
It's fun. I mean, it's a good day for the Sentinel. There's not a lot of, what is it, South Florida news?
Where is Gulf Breeze? Is it South Florida?
No, it is at the very top of the Panhandle. It's right it's by Alabama, and it's like we're on the west coast of Florida.
Well, the theory holds true. Not a lot was going on there.
No,
So the
it's
Sentinel
a
was
town.
thrilled to get these pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
It's
enough
a
that
town
they would run them.
Yeah, it's a town of like 6,000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty small. Now, Ed had been ruminating on the first abduction for about 9 days before the aliens came again. And in the meantime, he gotten a little pissed off about the whole deal. This is what he wrote about the half-assed abduction he'd gone through the week before.
It had tried to take me against my will. Had someone said, hey Ed, want to go for a ride? I might have agreed to go. But force me to obey, lift me off the road, freeze my body solid, treat me like an ant or a dog? No way. Not in this country. It's un-American.
It's un-American.
Un-American. And then I was Ed. And now for the listeners, I'm Ben there.
You see, this is character work.
That was so good.
But it's still kind of similar to you still. Like, I mean, this is
It's
like
like almost like I don't know how to act.
on November 20th at 4:30 p.m., Ed came home, walked in the front door, announced his presence to the household.
Hello, family of Americans.
Let me do it. Hello, family of Americans.
Ed.
He noticed a slight ringing in his right ear, like tinnitus. And the ringing got louder and louder until it turned into a full-on, maddening hum like the hand vibrator, much worse than the one he experienced the first time. And again, the right front of his brain was the focal point, and his wife, who found him struggling to stand up in the kitchen, held him up. And at this point, Ed thought he might be losing it, worried that he had picked up some kind of alien disease or was suffering from what he called, quote, UFO madness.
Ooh, that's better than reefer madness.
Is that what I have?
Could be. It could
I
be.
have literally been reading nothing but alien books for about a month.
Yeah.
I read both of the Gulf Breeze books and the Abductions book and another Jacques Vallée book. Am I insufferable?
I think it's good that you're reading.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. No, this is how you always are.
Yeah,
Beautiful
yeah,
man.
yeah, this is no different.
Nothing's changed. Do you feel like you're different right now than you always are?
I feel like I'm like cooler, calmer, more collected. I think people look up to me more. I'm an adult.
So as Ed was pulling himself together, he heard a blast of air, like a bus releasing its air brakes. After the noise came the same voice from the first encounter, the male one, but this time it was soft and spoke in what Ed guessed was an African dialect.
Mama Africa.
Oh my God, is that
Peter Duck.
You guessed it was an African island. You could be speaking fluent Spanish. She's like, that's an African island.
No, the voice would pause, then continue again, as if Ed was only hearing half of the conversation. Wait, that's Jamaican. What?
Sounds like an African dialect to me. I don't know.
And there's Ed.
That's it. That wasn't bad.
Now, Ed listened as he picked up his camera, walked out to his front yard, and yelled,
I hear you, you bastard!
the voice
That's good.
The voice stopped, and a rush of air blasted Ed as he looked upward to see a small speck of light fall at high speed towards him. The voice started speaking English and said,
Be calm. That
when Ed raised his camera up to take a picture, the voice said,
Don't do that.
then the female voice interjected and said,
Don't do that.
and then the third voice said, las fotos son de Rico.
Very good.
I spent a week in Puerto Rico.
I really wish you could take some of the shoe polish off your skin, Marcus, while you're sitting here on the radio. You can't see this because, of course, we're on a podcast. Yeah.
The female voice came back and told Ed that he couldn't expose him, that they won't hurt him, and that they just wanted to run a few tests, to which Ed said,
If I want to be examined, I'll let you know. Does I want to be examined? No, I would like to be examined. He's like one step away from getting a leg lamp.
Now, Ed snapped another picture as the UFO shot over to his right, possibly to escape the camera's view, although it's never really clear why they didn't just take the goddamn thing away from him if they were so worried about pictures being taken. And the voice came back and told Ed to step forward so he could be taken aboard, to which Ed said,
What gives you the right?
and the aliens replied simply,
We have the right.
and here is where I think it gets kind of interesting.
This is interesting. This is an interesting point. Dog meat. I don't allow you to have it.
Now,
It's a point. Yes.
Now, let's presuppose for a moment that President Dwight D. Eisenhower did in fact sign a treaty with the Greys in 1954, giving them the right to experiment and run tests on Americans in exchange for advanced technology.
I don't know whether or not I will definitely say it did happen. The more the question is, when was the treaty signed?
I mean, did they specify only anal and nasal?
Now, here's what I'm thinking. This answers that question. If that is true, then this could be the right that the aliens were talking about, the right to experiment. Furthermore, I'm just spitballing here, it could be that the 1954 treaty was renegotiated sometime in the late 80s to tone down the method of abduction, which is why their methods seem so weak. It could be that with the release of communion the previous year, it could be that the government was finally getting wind of what these aliens were actually doing to American citizens and stepped in to tone down all the butt business.
And Oliver North was the one responsible for selling arms to the aliens,
You honestly
benefiting the
But
Iranians.
honestly, you don't think that J. Edgar Hoover would have been like, I think we can maybe up this butt business.
I'm wearing my skirt, just telling you.
I honestly think, but this is the ongoing conversation about UFOs, though, in my mind, with myself, is that this is the break between are UFOs a physical phenomenon, or are they completely a psychic phenomenon? If it is like a dream logic, that if it's really an interdimensional experience, that these aliens are maybe right on top of us, they don't come from another fucking star system, they're right here, right? And they're just kind of fading in and out like weird, like signals. Yeah.
We've got a nerd alert. We've got a nerd alert. I haven't done that in a long time.
Yeah, it's the truth.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know if it's. I don't know if
It's
it's.
about
Their words.
Jacques Villette. Listen to me.
I just,
Listen to me.
Jack Follett. This is how you go crazy on a subway.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but I'm recorded now. Typically, we're doing this for money. So this is my job now.
If that makes it better or worse.
Thank you everyone for your support on Patreon.
Thank you so much. It allows me to do this. Jacques Villette wrote about the idea that they are a psychic phenomenon. That maybe the whole point of UFOs and the abduction scenarios and the sighting scenarios is that it's supposed to make us question the nature of reality. If that is like the inner thing, that maybe it's not about aliens or spacecraft or the experiments they do, it's all about what is real and what is not real. And that was the thing that we are constantly struggling with as human beings, and it's an example of that.
So if it's there to make us question the reality, who is asking us to question reality?
Ourselves.
This conversation is 20 more seconds. I'm going to blow my fucking brains out.
All right, so are you saying that it is some unconscious aspect of the collective unconsciousness that is asking us to question reality?
10 seconds to answer. 10 seconds to answer.
The whole point is that the two ideas are supposed to exist at the same time. You're supposed to consider it a physical actuality and a psychic actuality at the same time. Even though technically they cross each other, you have to hold both ideas in your mind, and that's what reality is hovering on the knife point between if I think about it, I make it real, and if I touch it, it's then real.
Okay, so just to wrap it all up with Subway sandwiches, they still have the $5 footlong. Even though the $5 footlong is $7, they still call it a $5 footlong, and people pay $7 for a $5 footlong. That is reality.
Let the idea hover in your mind, and that uncomfortable dissonance in
Even though
reality.
it's an obvious lie to pay $7 for a $5 footlong.
Actually, Ben, you do kind of get it.
I do get it. If I just brought it back to a Subway football.
That's a marketing lie.
Yeah, that's a marketing lie, but that's a reality. $5 football. $5 footlongs are $7. Yeah.
I mean, it could be that these are psychic phenomenon. It could be that these guys are working under new Eisenhower Treaty rules, or it could be that they're working under the old rules. These guys are trainees. They're not very good at it. They're just still working out what it is that they're trying to do. Case in point, when Ed refused to step forward to be taken aboard, the aliens tried the whole image thing once again, like they did with the dogs. Look at the dogs. Look at the dogs. But this time, it was naked lady.
Yeah.
Whoa.
That's what I'm talking about. If that alien became like the strip club, if the alien spacecraft became like the strip club for Beetlejuice,
Horrified. I think they should have just done naked dogs.
Shaved dogs.
I love a good shaved dog. They're cute even without the fur.
That is very true. Or sometimes if they shave the body but leave the head all the way.
That's the baby cut.
with little furry cocks.
No, like lions. They look like lions.
I think lions look like big furry cocks.
I think everything to you seems like a big cock.
Or a pussy.
Weird. So these naked ladies, by Ed's account, covered all the bases. Every type of woman of every race, with some pregnant women thrown in there just in case he was into that.
Rack and roll. That's like two legs.
You didn't get me. I like amputees.
Needless to say, this didn't entice Ed any more than the dog stage. It just freaked him out. As Ed was still struggling, the UFO voice said,
We will come for you.
and the UFO flew away into the darkness as Ed snapped one more Polaroid picture. Now, by this point, the story in the local newspaper started to gain a little bit of steam. Of course, it's a small town thing, so it starts off as a curiosity, and then one guy talks to another guy about it, and then the next guy exaggerates a little bit more, and the next guy exaggerates a little bit more, and then by this time, the entire town is talking about it. Some guys, of course, some guys are making sex jokes, the whole alien probe thing.
Sure.
There's even some guys that are saying that it's the work of the devil, that the demons are coming down finally to pass judgment on Earth. Everybody in town had an opinion on it.
Well, we were taking pictures. There are other pictures that pop up during this time period. There's other videos of the UFOs and Gulf Breeze that pop up during the time period. That's a part of what makes this Gulf Breeze incident so big in the world of UFOs. Because technically, yes,
Sorry,
it
guys.
possibly could be a gigantic mass hallucination of a bunch of people wanting to get in on what is a big, fun, current story.
And also, it was right next to a naval base, so a lot of these pictures that people were taking were just regular old airplanes.
Or a bunch of people were seeing this UFO, and then it's just about how you look at it. It depends on what you want out of the story.
Yeah. Or it could be that Ed actually did take these pictures, and these pictures are real, but it could be that he was just taking pictures of an experimental aircraft, and he just kind of filled in the blanks with the whole alien story.
I mean, either way, this is the most exciting conversations that's happened in Gulf Breeze ever since, like, one kid made it to the majors.
Yes, exactly. But honestly, though, if it's experimental craft, why the fuck is it flying over Gulf Breeze?
Because it was right next to the naval
That
base.
makes no sense.
That does make sense. That's where they were experimenting.
There's a lot of things, like the Montauk experiment, that took place in plain view.
Yeah, but that's some horseshit too. They don't know what that is. It's along the desert. All of those planes are flying around in the fucking New Mexico and Arizona. That's where all those deep dark secrets, like Dulce and all that stuff is all happening out there.
But what if it's a sea craft and they needed to test it on the
Because
sea?
they don't be in the water.
Well, it's got to go out of the water, though.
that's what it is.
It's like in and out of the water.
Then it should be, that's aircraft. That's Air Force.
But no, actually that would be the Navy, because the Navy has airplanes too.
I don't think they're going to be running these texts in front of Gulf Breeze. They know all these people, a bunch of yokels with big mouths.
David Robinson was in the Navy. He was the center for the Spurs.
I remember the Spurs.
So on the night of December 2nd, 1987, 12 days since the second sighting, Ed was woken up in the middle of the night by what he thought was his pool pump still running in his backyard. As he fell back asleep, deciding to just take care of it in the morning, Ed heard the sound of a baby cry.
I like in the book because it's like, baby crying. We don't have a baby.
Now, along with the baby, Ed also heard voices, but soon realized that once again the voices were coming from inside his own head. The voices were speaking Spanish, which Ed had learned from living in Costa Rica for 4 years.
Part of his weird checkered past is that they just, for some reason, they lived in Costa Rica for 3 years. The way they said is that they wanted to, like, take in the sights of Costa Rica or take a break from America for a while, which in my head means they were hiding from something.
No, a lot of people take breaks in Costa Rica.
Organic farming and things like that.
Yeah, I don't think that just
Francis a little bit.
No, the voices that he heard, a male and a female, were unaware that Ed was tuned in. And he said that it sounded as if they were coming through a blown-out speaker. Now, for Ed's part, he was now on the floor next to the bed. But this time, he wasn't defenseless. He, like any good American, now had a gun within arm's reach wherever he went.
Well, after the second sighting, he loaded up his whole fucking house.
Yeah.
When he bought new ammo, he bought a bunch of new guns. He's saying there's like, these aliens are gonna come and get me. Next time, I'm gonna put a fucking bullet in their head.
Because they were like, we come in peace, and they're like, and you'll leave in pieces.
Now, his bedtime gun was a .32 caliber pistol that he kept by his nightstand, a gun that he at that moment reached up from the floor and grabbed. By this time, his wife Frances had woken up and was now down on the floor with him. Again, the slight rush of air came, and the low hum began, signaling that another encounter was about to take place. And Ed, not having learned his lesson yet, started to crawl on his knees towards his front door, gun in hand, with his wife following behind on her hands and knees as well.
She wakes up to him being like, wait, he's fumbling around, grabbing the gun. She has no idea what's going on. He said, come with me. She's following him into the kitchen with a gun. After he's been rambling about the
He's got the gun, yeah.
Yes, they have not, she's not seen these UFOs yet. Up to this point. Yes, and that is a good partner.
Yeah, I agree. She's an amazing wife. I mean, he's acting like that character from The Burbs. You remember that? Mark?
This whole story is the Burbs, and we're going to get into that at the end of this episode.
Now, Ed opened the front door and crawled out onto the porch. Frances, understandably, stayed behind to watch his back. Ed whispered at their dog, Crystal, who was an overprotective Spitz, who barked with the slightest provocation, but was mostly silent during the alien encounter. So,
And the neighbor just peeks through the blinds and like, the Walters are at it again.
He's just outside screaming like, come and get me, you bastard! And like, a gun, waving around a gun in full back porch at night, screaming at his dog.
Honey, what's that doing? He's waving the gun around in the sky.
Well, as long as he's got a hobby.
That's fine.
now, as he was doing that, and the dog, for some reason, refused to wake up, but the dog was definitely still alive.
Good.
The dog was fine.
It reminds me of from What About Bob, when he's trying to, when Richard Dreyfuss is trying to wake him up before the TV interview,
Yeah.
and then the alarm goes off, he's like, oh man.
And now I like it. As you get older, you realize Richard Dreyfuss' character was right that whole time.
He was totally
Bill Murray's
right.
crazy.
Bill Murray is a dangerous psychopath.
So after that, a soft glow came out of the darkness directly overhead, going from the size of a dime to about half the size of his pole in only 2 seconds.
And this goes to the weird cartoonish reality that happens with these sightings and when people talk about close encounters with aliens and UFOs. And he said it reminded him of a Looney Tunes cartoon because it was like, "Ew," and it just like showed up right in front of him, like popped. Kind of fun.
Yeah.
And his wife saw this also.
Yeah.
So this is the first time they've both seen it together.
Yes.
Yeah. So Ed hauled ass back into the house, slammed the door shut, and locked it. The UFO voice commanded Ed to step forward, but instead of obeying, Ed grabbed his camera from the kitchen and went back outside.
The way he keeps saying step forward, it just sounds like he's at the DMV.
And once he got outside, he just kept running from like windscreen to windscreen, like he was a secret agent, holding a camera and a gun.
God, he's having a great time. He is so much fun.
having a blast. Because, you know, in the Burbs, Tom Hanks was having so much fun that whole time.
I mean, he's scared, but it's nice to feel something besides pure boredom.
Yeah, it's nice that he's just not a contractor anymore. Suddenly he is a UFO hunter. Suddenly he is very special. And that is also, you know, like I've seen people bring up that point before, UFO researchers, that, you know, you may ask, like, why would someone like Ed Walters, who's a family man, he's 40 years old, he's got 2 kids, he's a contractor, he's got a good job, he's got a pretty good life, why would he make this up? And it's pretty much the same thing how
It's like when truck drivers and moms get into doing crystal meth.
yeah, or more innocently, when like when a little kid likes to fantasize that they're adopted because their parents aren't their real parents. Their parents are king and queen somewhere.
It's adding drama to a life,
To a boring life.
Very, very boring.
It's exciting, and you know, like I think with all these alien, you know, abduction stories, the truth is these people really do, they react as if it's real. So is it?
We'll see how he does get pretty goddamn scared.
Yeah, he does. So Ed, once outside, going from windscreen to windscreen, finally found the right one and took picture number 10 as the craft's bottom light turned from white to orange before the UFO once again disappeared into the night. Ed, finally realizing that the noise he thought was the pool pump was actually the UFO hum, he went through the house and unplugged any appliance that might give off any hum whatsoever. The fridge, the aquarium pump, the central heater, everything. Because Ed knew that the hum, every time he heard it, an encounter was about to happen.
Now, also remember, we've got 2 young kids in the house.
17 and 10.
They're watching their father lose his fucking mind.
Exactly,
Right?
like a schizophrenic.
And also, he is telling them about this shit. They don't know about what's going on. Like, he's trying to keep it quiet, but in a way that he wants everybody to know that he's going through shit. He's, like, very publicly in the middle of his house being like, my brain! Like, in front of his children.
It is 10 and 17. You know, the 17-year-old is frantically filling out half of the college applications, just like so desperate to get out. And the 10-year-old's like, "Home is pretty cool."
Yeah.
You know.
But the 17-year-old, he actually gets in on it. He starts joining his father and thinks that it is a great time.
Well, yeah, they're going to find out after the fact. Because now the whole town, including their high school, is buzzing with these UFO fucking, all these UFO rumors. Ed is technically not yet named as the guy who's the center of all these UFO sightings are, but it's kind of getting known that that is what's happening because people are seeing his weird behavior everywhere.
Yeah, there's like 3 people who know. And there are people starting to notice that, like, when they bring up the UFOs to Ed, he just changes the subject. He's the only guy in town who doesn't want to talk about
But
it.
at the same time, he's leaving the Sentinel, the copy of the Sentinel, he leaves it in his truck. When he drives from contract place to contract place, he's showing people the article. Have you read this? It's very strange, because it's like he wants to be hidden, but also likes the importance of being the center of the UFO science.
It's pretty cool. So that same night, just a few hours later at 3:30 a.m., Crystal finally did her goddamn job and barked, but just once, enough to wake up Ed. No. Yeah, and the single bark, that was what alarmed him, because Spitzes, they're barky little fuckers. Let's hear an example of Spitz freaking out over a squirrel. And this is just a squirrel. This isn't even a fucking alien crack.
This is part of the crack research that your Patreon money, I go and think that it pays for it, and we want to thank you for it.
It's cute.
Yeah, but imagine just one of those, like this.
Oh God, it's like it's just the verbal equivalent of just loose leaf paper. If loose leaf paper could make a noise. It's like the dog from The Grinch That Stole Christmas. Cute dog. Cute dog.
So the noise of the single bark told Ed that something was up. So he took his pistol and his camera and went through the French doors that go from the master bedroom to a screened-in porch that overlooked the pool.
That's very common in Florida. It's called a lanai.
Now, am I accurate in describing what he's wearing as white underwear?
Yes.
White socks, a beard like Randy Quaid.
I imagine he's wearing like one of those like It's Miller Time shirts.
Right.
And he's got short shorts on and weird Adidas's.
No, most of the time he is in his underwear.
He does talk about this quite a bit.
And I imagine stocky, sort of thick thighs.
Yes, he's not right.
So Ed walked out into the porch, pulled the draw cord on the blinds, and staring at him through the glass was 4 foot tall.
Great.
He was wearing a dark, grayish black boxlock thing that hid most of his body. He was also wearing a helmet with a clear insert that revealed big black eyes. And in its hand, the alien held a glowing silver rod.
I thought you were going to say a copy of the Sentinel.
Have you read the paper? I made the big time. This section here common also again with Grays. A lot of times they are seen wearing little outfits. We know in Communion, when people made the movie of Communion, they always make aliens to be nude for some reason. But in actuality, these Grays are oftentimes seen with either silver little jumpsuits on or fun little capes. But his have little boxy armor on and white hair.
So it's sort of like their version of Fubu. For us by us.
You know what? Yeah, because in my head, it was American Apparel.
Oh, okay.
But then I imagine it's just an alive 17-year-old, maybe 18-year-old alien female with bush hair sticking out of the side of his costume.
We'll go with Uniqlo.
Now, upon seeing it, Ed naturally screamed and fell backward, but the alien didn't react, nor did the alien react when Ed pointed the pistol at him. Ed said the creature only stared at him with sad, curious eyes.
And that was also when the MUFON investigators later showed up to start helping them investigate these UFO sightings. They said that was one detail that Ed said specifically about this alien sighting that they thought made it real. Was he said that the eyes were very wet looking.
Is it possible it was just a Boy Scout?
Oh, even if he was just an Asian Boy Scout, he's very racist.
Might be.
The scream woke up Francis, who also swears to seeing the alien in the flesh. But the creature, instead of coming in or signaling any greeting whatsoever, simply turned to the left and walked out of the couple field. This made Ed angry. In his usual indignant manner, Ed got up from the floor to unlock the deadbolt and passage lock to chase after the creature so he could tell him what for. The thing was, Ed said it was impossible for him to open both locks without using both hands, so he set down the gun and the camera to do so, but forgot to pick up either one before going after the creature, which is why he has pictures of the craft, but not pictures of the creature.
That's a crucial moment there. That's
It was definitely a buzzer.
Yeah.
A buzzer shot that he fucked up.
Get that camera out there.
Yeah, so Ed ran out onto the porch with the intention of capturing the creature and do God knows what with it. But as he approached the alien, the blue beam came back in a flash from the sky and froze Ed's right leg. The beam then began to lift Ed off the ground, leg first, up towards the craft, which had suddenly appeared 50 feet above him, and Ed, thinking quickly, grabbed onto the screen door jamb. Francis, who was watching the whole thing from the French doors, grabbed Ed's arms and pulled until he was finally free. The beam disappeared, the UFO hovered away, and the creature skittered out through the chain link fence.
Literally, they said it walked like Mac and me. It was like,
Oh, yeah.
out the fence. But he said they got back in the house. They looked up out the window, and they watched it go like the UFO went zip up, zip, bounced out to a field that was like past their house, out on the middle of the field. They watched the thing go. Blue beam shot down. He grabbed the Polaroid camera, took a picture of it, and that's where the infamous picture of his with the alien craft, the blue beam kind of coming out of the side of it. That is where he took that picture after the fact.
So, I mean, I don't understand how weak these beams are. He's out there acting like a drunk rock cat. He's got one leg up in the air. The neighbors have to be like, "What's that doing?" It looks like he's not sober again. And then he finally takes a picture. How is the beam so weak it can't lift up this one person?
I mean,
BT.
I am saying that it hovers in and out of what is real to us. It is hard to say everything involving the incident. It's like a dream. It's like a living dream. They don't know what to do with it. So it's like, it may be not seen by other people. You're literally just watching maybe hang upside down without seeing anything else. If you're looking at it from the outside, there are very few people that have seen if the abductions actually happen. There's a little bit of like, people have seen people floating out of buildings, but that's also, of course, heavily debunked all the time because then you just believe in somebody's crazy word over your word, and everybody else is not as crazy as everybody else.
You know what? You have lost your mind.
3 days later, the aliens showed up in a different craft, similar to the first, but much larger. This is when the aliens finally decided to give Ed their own little pet name for him. They called him Z-Hots.
Yeah.
That's a way cool name.
Yeah, dude.
Now there's some
It's like the name of the kid that was the heart I'm Captain Planet. What's his name? Malaki?
Don't remember. Captain Planet was propaganda. I hated that show from day one.
Fair and balanced.
Now, there is some speculation as to why the aliens chose the name Zbrush. The one that makes the most sense is that
I
Zbrush.
don't know if this makes the most sense.
Actually, this does make the most sense because the aliens, they were speaking Spanish.
I don't know if they were speaking Spanish.
Well, it's possible, and this is the most plausible one, I think. And if Ed made it up himself, then it's fairly clever. Like, the most sense that Zbrush makes is that Zbrush is close phonetically to Zbrush.
But I believe it's Sejas.
No, it's Zbrush.
Does it mean one with shit in his underwear?
No, it means eyebrows.
Yeah,
Oh.
and Ed had very prominent eyebrows.
Good. Very good. Creative name.
Yeah, it's very great, yeah. And then Ed came up
Sounds
with
like a Dick Tracy villain name that they had for him.
It really does.
Old eyebrows now. They're like it's in roast mode.
So what's your arch villain power? Don't got one.
I can look like I'm being mysterious.
That's a good power to have.
Yeah, and Ed came up with it. Like I said, it's pretty clever. And I also gotta say, like, even if this whole thing is, even if Ed made up this entire thing, Ed and Francis, they made it up together. This is one hell of a story.
It's very fun.
Like, it's a really fun story. And Ed, he ain't a half bad writer. But either way, Ed said that the aliens showed up again in the middle of the night, told him, do not resist, stay where you are, we will not harm you, etc., etc. Pretty standard alien stuff, but this time they added something new.
You are in danger.
To this, Ed responded by pointing his pistol at the UFO and saying,
Come and get me! Come and get me!
Come to America.
God, I love Ed. And again, that was Ed. Come and get me!
So there was a flash, and the UFO left once more, and we'll be back next week with squirty liquid, terror on the highway, and the boys from MUFON on part 2 of the Gulf Breeze sightings.
Part 2 of Gulf Breeze sightings is definitely the verbs. Got a bunch of idiots all like bumbling around the school part of town chasing after UFOs. It's a lot of fun. If it's not real, who gives a shit?
Yeah. And you can thank us for putting the word squirty liquid terror on the highway. For the first time ever. Squirty liquid.
Just remember that, but I really do think that this is a story. Like, you can completely believe that all this is fake. If you want to, you believe the pictures are fake. You can.
If you want to keep your job, you won't talk about it at work.
You won't do that. But a part of the UFO phenomenon, which does keep me up at night, which is the hovering between what is real and what is not real. Like, if someone believes that they are abducted, does that make it less real than if they were not actually abducted? But if they still have the symptoms and the memories of being abducted, then technically it happened.
Good point. Who knows?
We've had
I'm
many
just
a
gonna say
cab
good point, okay? Because we have to stop the thing.
I just think about it all the time. All the time.
We should just do one day where we just talk and don't mention aliens. We'll do it tomorrow.
It's the
New
most,
Year's Eve.
It's literally the most important
It's
discussion topic of all time. And no one wants to talk about it because they're too afraid of getting too close to the truth.
maybe it's
Because
not
they-
real. It might not be real. We talked about our credit scores before the show.
We did.
And those are also made up.
Made up.
But, at least a little bit.
But then we have to consider them real, right?
Yes, we
It's like
do.
the
That's a
money.
good point.
Money's the same exact way.
Yeah, but they're like calculations and like figures.
But that's just because that's how long you have to believe in the lie. You believe in the lie for so long that now it's real. So you mean aliens, you fucking idiots.
Well, now you're being insulted. Now you've become full circle insulted.
Now it's like
Now you're one of those people.
Put me in a corner.
ad hominem, we've reached ad hominem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nothing makes me more dangerous than being placed in a. The only way out is fighting.
Yes, that's right. No, in no way are you going to go down a rabbit hole that you won't be able to get out of, and your career will take a turn for the worse. So this is good. That was this episode. I can't wait for Golden Breeze Part 2. Fascinating stuff. All right, so let's do. What do we do now? We say thank you for listening. and
Yeah,
things
we
like
thank
that.
to say thank you for listening. Thanks so much to everybody who gave to our Patreon. Remember, if you give to our Patreon, even $1, every single person who gives to our Patreon gets first crack at almost every live show that we do. And man, we have a ton of live shows coming up in the new year.
Yeah.
We have a live show almost every single weekend until April. So we're actually not allowed to announce officially what dates are coming up, but January 4th is when we're going to announce the vast majority of them. So if you join the Patreon, then you will be able to get tickets a day early, which is a big advantage because every show that we've done so far has sold out. Every single one. So you want to get your tickets early, and if you give at least $1 to our Patreon, you get access to those tickets. And if you get more than $1, there is a ton of bonus stuff that you get. Patreon.com/lastpodcast on the left is where you do that. Thank you guys so fucking much for giving to us. It is we have truly got to a life-changing point here.
Also, and we're changing the format of our live show, and Boston is going to get the first run of that.
Yeah.
An experiment, but I'm excited.
Now, Boston is January 6th, right?
Boston is January 7th.
January 7th.
Yeah, we got Boston January 7th. CaveComedyRadio.com/live is where you can find all of those tickets.
And these live shows are such a fun communal event. Everyone gets together and you just get to hang out in each other's company. And it's really, really nice. And it's so fun to talk to you guys after the show.
And no one's attempted to shoot one of us in the head yet.
Don't even throw that idea out there. That's what I always say.
Well, and speaking of heads, I want to I did not get to personally thank the person who gave me the conjoined baby twin heads in Seattle. So thank you so much. Whoever it was, I don't know your name, but thank you so much. It is going to be a centerpiece in mine and Carolina's new apartment.
And I thanked him on Abilene's Top Hat this week, but I want to thank Mr. Weber for giving me the Vladimir Putin calendar for 2017. It's very nice. And thanks so much for supporting all the shows here on CCR. We're doing great. Abilene's Top Hat for everything politics. Roundtable of Gentlemen, page 7 for all your entertainment needs. Let's see, sex and other human activities, and you want to hear Henry's sister talk about sex and other human activities.
It is mostly a mental health advice
It's
podcast.
changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because Jackie's activities have changed.
Oh, thank God. But of course,
And I have to thank Ellie and Steph in Portland who helped save our ass when we left. I don't know if you remember this, because you were in a different frame of mind.
No, I was seeing aliens.
We left the bag in our car. They came back and helped us.
Oh, that was very sweet.
Thank you so very much. And I've also got a new project going on over on Spotify. I can't do the Lucky Bomb Show anymore. I don't have time. But I am doing weekly playlists on my Spotify called the Lucky Bomb List. Yeah, I know.
Weird.
I know, right? So I'm gonna be doing that every single week. Go follow me on Spotify to get those playlists.
Well, yeah, thank you for carrying my drunk body home.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was nice.
You were very good. You were very thankful.
I have to be thankful because they got us to our hotel.
Yes.
It was very nice.
Hail Satan. Follow us on stupid Instagram at LP on the left. Follow me on Instagram, Dr. Fantastic. Twitter at Henry Loves You. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm at Ben Kissel on Instagram. Ben Kissel 1 on Instagram, Ben Kissel on Twitter, Marcus Sparks is Marcus Sparks for everything.
And then at LP on the left for everything fresh.
That's correct. Hail yourselves.
Now, I'm so close to it.
With your installations?
Hail me?
How is this the hardest part for us?
I don't know what's happening.
For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to CaveComedyRadio.com.
There's no place to escape to.
This is the Lost Tomcast on the left.
That's when the cannibalism started.
How are you?
Oh, that's good. That's wow.
I don't really eat crap with my smells. I think a lot of the times in these episodes,
So Edward Billy Meyer is a one-armed Swiss UFO collaborator who claims that
Thank you for using the term collaborator.
yeah, he's a collaborator. He claims that he is the sole contactee of a race of aliens from the planet Era. That race is known as the Pleiadian, and that is, he does make sure that you must say Pleiadian. It's not Pleiadian, it's not Pleiadian, it's Pleiadian.
Now, there is a J in the name.
Yes, he's Swedish or Swiss, whatever he is.
He's Swiss.
And he's an AI.
So this guy is sort of the idea of UFO, thinkers, and that everything that he touches falls apart.
Yeah, it took 40 years to build.
Yes.
He has been the recipient of photographs, metal samples, and sound recordings of and from Pleiadian spaceships. Over the last 74 years, Billy has had 1,209 personal contacts and 1,241 telepathic contacts with Pleiadian extraterrestrials, in addition to extraterrestrials from other planets in the Pleiadian Federation, including the Lyrans and the Vegans from Vega.
The vegans from Vega just won't shut up and just be like, we know you're from Vega.
This sounds like the world's worst strip club. Vegans from Vega.
That's how you know. It's like, don't worry, you don't have to worry about finding out who's from Vega. They'll tell you. It's a vegan joke. That's it.
The gin is dry and so is the pussy. Was that a good stream?
And all of the cakes are made out of dates.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah. And that name, Billy is not his real name. His real name is Edward. Billy is
Spelled in the
nickname-
weird Swiss way, Edouard.
Edouard. Yeah. Billy is a nickname that was given to him when he was younger by an American who was almost certainly making fun of him, as young Billy was prone to dressing as an Old West cowboy most of the time. So he was Billy the
And there's a problem also, he was really into Wild Bill, that's what he said. He viewed him as a sort of idol. So literally, his heroes were liars and thieves. And he named himself after them. Yes. And he was a very, it's a weird spot he passed. He believed that he was the only person chosen by the Pleiadians to speak to the planet Earth. We're going to go into all of this. It's maybe not real. It's my heart.
I am sitting here right now in front of you, and I'm just saying that I want to build. I am currently in belief in Billy. I believe all victims, and I believe Billy Meyer.
He's not a victim.
He's a victim of the
He may very well be victims of several old men in a field that all look like Santa Claus, that all wanted to tell him how he was a special little boy.
Right, giving him strange gifts.
Yeah, his first contact with the Pleiadian came when he was just a 5-year-old boy in the Swiss countryside when he was visited in the middle of the night by an old extraterrestrial Pleiadian humanoid named Slav.
Sloth. It's like we're gonna put all of the letters together in Swiss.
How do you spell it? Can you just give me
S is in sloth. I is in automatic. T is in twike. And H is in height.
I don't think Twank is a word.
Oh, when you meet one, you'll know.
So Scott eventually told Billy that he was the 7th incarnation of the prophet that connects Earth to the Pleiadian people, starting with a guy named Enoch around 11,000 years ago, continuing on through Jesus, aka Emmanuel, who we'll get to later, and Muhammad, finally settling on a 5-year-old Swedish boy.
Never tell a Swedish boy your son. You know what I mean?
that's sad.
Just say, like, of course you want a Swedish boy. He's got an apple pie. He's got pudgy knees, big eyes to see everything, and a tiny mouth that's not as easy to reveal secrets.
You are going into a Stephen King level of,
Oh, we'll talk about this. I just finished rereading Stephen King's It. There is a 5-page, 10-year-old fucking orgy in that book where the girl describes the penis of each one of the boys, and then they comment.
Yeah, it's like Oliver Stone's JFK sex scene, but with children.
Oh, with children.
So, I do want to ask, what did this look like when Billy Meyer met with Spad? So, what did that actually look like? Was that telepathic?
I can describe it. So he was out by the lake with his father. He was 5 years old. He said he received a special feeling inside of himself that said he needed to look towards the sky. This is his fucking speech. He looked up a craft darted across the sky, a traditional dish-shaped one. From that day forth, he saw lights moving around in the sky. He was fascinated with the sky. So eventually, one night in the middle of the night, he is awoken by a sensation which you hear a lot in alien abductee stories. When they say that they want to go outside for some reason. He goes outside. There's a glowing pear in the sky. He comes around the
Like a
cloud.
fruit?
Like a fruit, yes. Or like Dom DeLuise's body.
Oh, I see. Love that.
Chris Christie's body.
Oh my goodness, don't like him.
It landed. An adult male, full-grown beard, comes out named Spot and says, "Let us sit and speak." And they speak to each other telepathically. He tells young, not Billy, Edouard at the time, that he's a special little boy that was created by the Bajorans in order to advance their work. Fuck that. They're from the 80s too, so that's the thing what I don't like about the story. I think he needs to be specifically specific so it sounds super real. It's just like, we all know it's the Pleiades. They say it's from the fucking Pleiades. They call it the Seven
I heard it was
Sisters.
a blogger.
No, it's not. I just hate it when they do that. They say it's like, no, it's actually Pleiades. It's like, because that makes it more real. Like when people say UFO instead of UFO, it drives me nuts.
Right. They get caught up in semantics.
Yes, I hate that shit. And so Spock told me, especially boy, that there were actually 4 other little boys that were created and that were supposed to serve this task. But while he was the one 5-year-old that was chosen, he said yes. And the other ones, 2 of them died in a car crash and 1 died. That is true. And then 1 is just somewhere.
Yeah, how did they lose track of the one? Alright, okay, so that's, okay, thank you for that backstory. So that's how they met. They were, and then his poor father was just like, hey, poor kid,
I am just glad that my son's got a brand new feather.
So over the next 10 years, Spock would communicate to Billy through electronically induced hypnosis. He would communicate what Billy called, quote unquote, important data on many fields of knowledge, including humanities, history, creation, facts, etc., which he would need to learn and retain. And Spock told Billy that due to this process, by the time Billy was 7, he had the intellect and emotional understanding of a 35-year-old man.
And as I read that, as a 35-year-old man, Billy's an idiot. He's an idiot at 7, and he's an idiot at 35.
Also, it does seem like the reasoning of like why it was okay for Woody Allen to marry his daughter.
Yeah, she was a 35-year-old.
So mature. Also, he's been spending all his time alone in a giant pear-shaped glowing room with a man looking like Santa Claus telling him special stuff about he's a special boy. He grew up fast. Wait. In a molest.
Yes.
I don't want to say molest.
It sounds just
But we're also going to, we left out a part of this in this little world of information. I know Mark,
Yes, I was about to say it. Please, Henry, fill in the fucking blanks on this one.
So one thing I will say is that he wrote an 1,800-page series of documentation of all of these visitations called the contact reports that he wrote over a period of time. We're going to get into when he was reached out to by Wendell Scott, who was a real UFO researcher that got caught in fucking Billy Myers' fucking net, right? His Polish photo point.
right.
That he knew a priest named Father Zimmerman. He didn't want to tell his parents. He knew the priest. Lovely. But he innocent man.
Oh, yeah, was he?
Absolutely.
The priest is Father Zimmerman?
Wait, he knew a priest named Father Zimmerman, and he didn't want his parents to know about his interactions with the priest?
That seems
With the priest
interesting.
and the other old man that he used to go meet in the field. And so he went to this priest and told him there's a man speaking to me in my brain named Spock who's telling me all this information about the Earth and things that can happen in the future. And Father Zimmerman says, I understand they're talking about what's left. Don't tell anyone we're having these conversations. And this is true. He's like, you have to understand that you're experiencing something very special. You're a little boy. Little boys is
5 years old. Yes. Henry is currently touching me just to make the effect really feel.
You little boys that you sometimes it's like you get physical television. It's not just this ring. It's touch his elbows. Ooh, you get a little Swedish boy, his fucking eyes big, just dewy with wetness, staring at this priest. And it's like, yes, but there's also a thing called spiritual telepathy, which is a deeper understanding. That's what you have to let this come. Let it come inside you. And that's what he kept saying. And Father Zimmerman, like, kind of opened up to him and said it was okay and explained to him that he was being prepped by aliens as well to help Billy understand himself within the storyline of the John.
I gotta say this, there is something about molesters, they can find a way to get there.
So
you know, the kid came with a problem with aliens, that kid could have come in and be like, I think I'm having too many sugary snacks at lunch.
We gotta start working out.
They can always
You
pivot.
gotta come by my shack. I have all of these kettlebells.
Isn't that crazy?
Father Zim is also kind of when you go on a date with like somebody and you have to pretend to be interested in the fact that they felt like they were born to be a bluesman. And you have to go like, yeah, it's interesting. Zimmerman and a fucking dude named Spoff. I'm pretty certain Father Zimmerman's first name is George. George? A fucking Swedish first name. And I imagine what happens if Father Zimmerman tells him it's okay to talk to aliens, and then you have another old man who's just coming out of the field with a car with a bunch of Christmas lights wrapped around it, and it's fucking mollusk season.
And then Father Zimmerman winks at him. He's like, "Tell him you're the alien."
I'm the aliens?
Yes, you're the alien.
Oof, I love the roleplay. I am as hard as Gibraltar.
So apparently, because of all of this type of stuff that's going on, all this telepathy, this electronically induced hypnosis, he would eventually have the highest degree of spiritual evolution of any human being on Earth. And that is why Billy is the only person out of 7 billion humans who is allowed to speak to the Pleiara, who's allowed to speak to them, who's allowed to see them, who's allowed to communicate with them telepathically. They will only communicate with the most highly evolved being on this planet for no other reason I can figure out other than just a bunch of snobby dickheads.
Well, if
So,
you were...
yeah, hold on. They're just a bunch of snobby
Snobby dickheads. I'm saying, yeah, the fucking Pleiara. They're all just a bunch of snobby dickheads. Oh, I'm only going to talk to the most highly spiritually evolved beings.
You're talking to a dumpy Swissman who shits cheese. I mean, this is not... You don't know how snobby they are.
They're not talking to me.
Well, that's because you're on your medication.
Exactly. He knew you would go on podcasts and they can't have all the information spread too fast. But he had said it too. Apparently that's what the Plajarans actual... You can correct me?
You want correct? Correct. Correct the record. We're just telling the truth, Henry. You're getting it wrong, and Marcus is correcting the record.
It's like there's like veins moving into my eyeballs.
That's good.
They said that having too many speaking for the Plajarans all at once, I cannot say it.
It's fine. It's the last time. I'm not going to do any more. We're just going to have to agree to disagree.
It's Polarian.
Bullshit. They said that having too many speakers all at once, it's too many cooks would spoil the broth. And they also said that it takes
They use
time.
that analogy?
Yes.
They actually use that now.
They literally have it in the writing. This like as a term that you humans use all the time. I've heard that sometimes too many cooks spoil the stew.
It's almost like it was written by a human being.
No way.
Now let's learn a little bit more about these Pleiaran peoples. They look much like us with minor anatomical differences that are never quite specified, or ones that I've never actually been. Henry, have you found out what those minor anatomical differences are?
No, I think they just said that to him because it was all like something to cover the molesting.
I think they all look like Jennifer Love Hewitt.
She does have an alien look about her.
That's what I'm saying. Light on the bottom, heavy on the top.
The female version that he's talking to, and her name is Askat. You're gonna find out later on after Spock dies somehow, for some fucking reason.
Now you're just giving away all the plot.
You're giving away the plot points. It's hilarious. Sorry, you need to get this right, Henry. It's rare that I am the expert here. I'm saying over the initial. I'm sorry, this is how
No,
what you win.
it's like when you go to Starbucks and when they say large, they do you need venti?
No, I'm gonna large.
I want the big one.
I literally ask. I just go in and it's the biggest one possible.
Yeah.
But at every restaurant I go to, I say, give me the biggest thing of whatever I want.
And they're like, you are just so funny. Oh, so the Askat looks sort of like, do you remember in Total Recall when
Yes.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is having sex with Sharon Stone and she turns out to be evil, and then he chooses his like the woman of his dream woman.
Mars woman,
Yeah. And it's what's her name? The woman who's kind of square shaped.
I know exactly who you're talking about. I don't know her name.
What's her name? Not Benicio del Toro. That's a man. No, but it's the female version of the man.
Benicio del Toro is the female of Benicio del Toro.
Her name is like
That's how it works.
The one that goes 2 weeks. That one?
the woman.
You know what, Marcus? I want you to take control right now.
She looks like the female version of the heart from Captain Planet.
Okay, that works.
Rachel Chakotay.
How is anyone supposed to know that reference?
How are you supposed to know?
I know it's her old movie. I'm just saying, she's a very pan-ethnic looking woman.
It was the worst description I've ever heard in my life.
Well, besides them having those minor anatomical differences, they also live for about 1,000 years, have a population of about 120 billion spread across their federation, and are all Nordic looking.
Well, apparently there are two types, two unicorns are filled with human-like creatures. There are actually very few creatures that are not human-like, because we all come from the same base society for millions and millions of years ago, and we're all seed races.
So it's doll and doll?
Doll and doll.
Doll and doll?
Yes.
And what separates us from each other?
A fraction of a second.
A fraction of a second.
A fraction of a second. See, Era, the Pleiadian homeworld, is a fraction of a second shifted from our own dimension.
See?
Yeah. See?
Yeah, it's
No, it's all making sense.
You get it? Like, they're just like a fraction of a second in the future, so therefore, they're in different dimensions. You see how that works? Like,
See?
I do believe you misspoke, though. It's Polygarian.
Thank you.
so even though they're from a different dimension, the Pleiadians and Earthlings descend from common ancestor. Originally, there were 40,353,607 different human races in 343 different skin colors.
Toe. Less than toe.
Right.
Onyx. Mocha. Crusty underwear.
Argyle. Argyle is a pattern, though.
Argyle? No, I was thinking Argyle or arugula.
Pistachio. Thank you very much. It's called pistachio.
Oh, and just so you know, apes actually descended from human beings, not the other way around, although Billy Meyer never really actually gets into how that actually happened.
So then apes would be more advanced than us, theoretically, right?
Not necessarily.
No.
Lateral fraction of a second.
I don't know. I believe this man.
The problem with all of this is Billy never really goes into detail.
I don't think it's a whole horseshit.
way.
It's difficult. No, I believe Bill.
Well, he goes into high detail about the conversations that he has about, say, spirituality, the universal teachings of spirit that they talk about. They say the teachings of the spirit. That's why they're here. They're here to tell us all about how we can become higher beings.
See?
I love it.
Become higher beings
See?
and like neutralize the negative effects of like religion. You know? Like that's what they're there. Even though, you know, their main contacts in the last 2,000 years have been Jesus and Muhammad, they're still like, nah. Organized religion is bad. There are ways that we can get towards the center of the universe of love together, having fun with Florence.
With Florians. I'm wondering.
It's clear as day.
I actually gotta love it because he wants to take the violence out of religion, which is really the major problem that all of us have with organized religion. It gets corrupted and then used by governments to kill one another.
That's my question, though.
I have a question. Did he ever actually pivot and try to become sort of a cult leader type? Or was he just, did he never have
No, you don't. This is the end of this story. Is that Michael Horde, his PR man that comes on later on the line, who does all this website design, he does theyfly.com. This is my question. If the majority keep making profits and make horrible religions, why do they keep doing that?
No, you're just gonna go back and fix what you broke.
Do you think they do? It's literally the definition of insanity.
Actually, they can go back to the pixel and they can time travel too. But
They can do whatever they want.
So they were just doing this on purpose.
Pictures of pterodactyls.
yeah, and so let's come back to young Billy Meyer and Scott, who went on many magical adventures together. Henry, do you have any examples of the many magical adventures that young Billy and Scott went on?
Henry looks thoroughly exhausted already.
It really does make me sad because I love UFOs. I believe in UFOs. I think there's a lot of stuff that would support contact from aliens. I think that it's abductee stories are real. Billy Meyer takes away from it. But the thing is, I just think Billy Meyer spent 10 years getting molested in a Swedish shack. No! By a man dressed as Santa Claus.
No, you don't remember that story where they went and met Gandhi?
No! They did. They met Gandhi. He
What
met
did
the
Gandhi
king.
say to them?
He said, "Oh, bring me a sandwich."
That's where we get those showing a little racist
No.
comments on that too.
That's not
Ben
racist.
Kingsley was a white man who played Gandhi in a film, and he won an Oscar for it.
And Gandhi was hungry much of the time.
Bring me a sandwich, maybe a pizza. Thank you.
Again, Jamaica. Everything always ends up in Jamaica.
But he saw Gandhi. He was king of Egypt, who was very tall. He was molested about 1,000 times, and he went and learned weather stripping.
He met Saddam Hussein.
He did.
Saddam Hussein, but they met each other when they're 22 years old. Saddam Hussein said that he was a thug at the time, and he was a part of a bunch of roving gangs. He was kind of like a West Side Story, and he was Danny Zuko.
Ooh, cool. I love a young Saddam.
That's Chris as well. That's Chris.
Yeah. So unfortunately, sloth reached Billy at the end of his 1,000-odd years. The old alien died in 1953. And Billy, now a teenager, then came under the care of a young humanoid woman from the doll system named multi-ethnic.
Like the chick from Total Recall. What's her name?
She looks like a
Rachel Ticketon.
She's Rachel Ticketon. I
Rachel
think it's like it's Ascara de la Hoya. It's like the female version of a male
Oscar
name.
De La Hoya?
No, her name's like Sarah Aranya.
No, it's totally Rachel Ticketon.
This is Rachel. We found the name.
Maria de la Fuente. I'm staring at her right now.
Her IMDb calls her one tough cookie who can hold her own.
She wrote that.
She did not. She's a great actress.
Yeah, Aspen also just sort of looks like a woman that worked at a record store. She's like a little too cool.
Yeah, this is a real woman.
No.
No, she's not real.
In our sense of real.
In Billy Myers' sense, she is real. She is the guide. She is his contact between the Pleyarans and Billy himself.
So it's a make-em-up.
Well,
So if he's on a date with her, there's no one sitting across from her.
yeah, we see her, but she just,
She's kind of there in a way that your grandfather's always looking out for you. You know what I mean?
just don't even
Like, you
understand.
know from heaven he's looking out for
no,
you.
she is a physical being.
I can touch her.
You can touch her.
Okay, I can shake her hand and say, good to meet you. Here, I am Ben.
Of course, yeah, you absolutely could. These people do exist, however, they do not have any contact with any of us.
Because we're not worthy, because we're not the most evolved human beings on the face of the planet.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. And also it's funny here that, when he was a little kid, he had puberty all of a sudden. He's a high chick. His biography is to be believed. He went to prison for assault twice.
See, this is the problem. Is that he has a lot of these stories where he did go to prison 2 times. He joined the French Legion and then abandoned it by walking through a desert. Just left it in the middle of it. He said he couldn't find his place in life. He ended up in Turkey, where he was a hitman for the government known as the Phantom. Did you read that?
No, I don't.
He said that the Turkish government hired him to hunt serial killers in Turkey. And then he became known as the Phantom. And then everywhere he went, people knew him as the Phantom. And he has a series of headshots of him with an Arabic, sort of weird, I'm not gonna say it's a scarf on his head. And it's him just posing in front of various places, in front of the King's Guards. This is where he also believes that Aspen has taken him to visit several different leaders of every country in the world where they were given brief. He's the new Messiah, and they met each other and they took pictures, but those pictures got burned in a fire. Those pictures aren't extra as well. And then he went back in the past and took pictures of pterodactyls. And he has them.
Yeah, so he deserted from the Legion. He went back to Switzerland and was institutionalized for 2 years. After his release, he of course did the whole assassin thing for a while until he ended up in the Middle East. He sort of worked as a day laborer, and there's where he met a priest named Isa Rashid in 1963.
So we have these things. Is there documentation of him being arrested twice? Is that real?
I mean, there's no documentation.
This would be documented, correct?
There is no proof that this man existed. I don't even know if it's his real name. I don't know. None of it's backed up. It's all just his life. It's all based on his stories.
Right.
This is also back in the day where I guess the records were loose. And you could kind of just roll in and out of places and just kind of show up and give a fake name. And he's calling himself Billy.
We just think it was solidify one fact of this person's life.
You can't.
I mean, we can maybe start with the Talmud of Emmanuel.
That's even no, because I got it burned in a fire.
All right, well, let's hear about that.
Yeah, let's hear about it. Yeah. So Billy Meyer and his friend, a former priest named Isa Rashid, they discovered the Talmud of Emmanuel. Spelled Jmmanuel. The Pleyarans were very insistent that Emmanuel be spelled exactly that way. Jmmanuel. And they were so insistent that Billy always makes a point to say that the Pleyarans were insisted that he spell it that way.
Why don't they like vowels?
Emmanuel.
It costs money.
Oh, I see. They're going with the Wheel of Fortune method?
Yes. It's kind of like me, Tomas, Jumanuel.
I see.
Man.
Yeah, so is it Emmanuel or Jumanuel?
It's Emmanuel.
Jumanuel?
Jumanuel. It is Emmanuel because it's the Hebrew spelling. It's like when you wrote, I believe it's in, is it Temple of Doom? He's going through the notes.
No, that's the Last Crusade.
Last Crusade, Indiana Jones' Last Crusade, when he's going through and he's just like, I believe he said that, and he was just like, he's on the E, he's like, you just go with the J, and then he goes down to the knee, and that's how I learned that fact.
And I do want to say, Henry said that to us before the podcast, and both Marcus and I were like, what the hell are you talking about?
I am lost.
No, it makes sense now. I get it the second time around.
Yeah. So anyway, while on an afternoon stroll in Jerusalem, Billy and Issa discovered a small hole in the ground that had somehow been overlooked for 2,000 years. After getting a funny feeling about it,
He always gets a funny feeling.
he gets a lot of funny feelings. He started digging into the hole a little further and he discovered an abandoned tomb. Contained within, hidden under a large flat rock, is a package containing 4 separate scrolls covered with Aramaic writings. These scrolls would come to be known as the Talmud of Emmanuel.
These were a secret chapter of the Bible.
I'm going to rebrand them the Dickweed Papers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these scrolls were actually written by Judas Iscariot on behalf of Emmanuel, aka Jesus
Christ.
Jesus Christo. Truth is, it was not Judas Iscariot who was the betrayer of Jesus.
Yeah, you idiot. You were wrong the whole time. You fucking moron.
Holy shit. In fact, the two were like best buddies.
Yeah, you
I'm going to say
fucking dummy.
we've all fallen into roast mode.
No, best buddies. They loved each other. Actually, it wasn't Judas Iscariot who betrayed Jesus. It was Judah and Harry.
Yeah, you fucking moron. Get your shit straight. You should be allowed to have kids. You've been wrong for so long.
Ted Bundy wasn't the killer. It was a guy named Ted Glumby. Everyone knows Glumby did it.
Tell the jury they're wrong. Tell the jury they're wrong.
Yeah, it is quite the coincidence that Jesus was betrayed by a man who had almost the same name as his best friend.
It
I
really
feel
is.
bad for Judas.
Absolutely, it is a coincidence. Like crazy.
And that was Judas's last words were, Glumby did it!
But what the Talmud of Emmanuel proves, if it is in fact real, you take the Bible as truth as well, is that Bible stories were a hell of a lot more alien based than the church has led us to believe.
That was so fucking cool if that was true.
Well, this actually, I mean, this is fairly common in alien lore,
I got a
right?
whole book about it. It's called Extraterrestrials in the Bible.
It's boring.
Yeah, boring as shit.
Well, that means it's real.
Yes, exactly. That's you make it specific and boring.
Yeah, and this is the Talmud of Emmanuel's version of the baptism of Jesus by St. John the Baptist in the River Jordan.
Who had antennas? Chapter 3. When Jumanuel had been baptized, he soon came out of the water of the Jordan, and behold, a metallic light dropped from the sky and descended deeply over the Jordan. Consequently, they fell on their faces and pressed them into the sand, while a voice from the metallic light spoke, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. He will be the King of truth, who will lift the human race to knowledge." Behold, after these words, Jumanuel entered into the metallic light, which climbed into the sky, surrounded by fire and smoke, and passed over the lifeless sea, as the singing of the metallic light soon faded away. After that, Jumanuel was no longer seen for 40 days and nights.
You sound like an IBM computer eating a mayonnaise and tomato sandwich. I don't know why, but I'm just, that's a classic sound.
So where did Jumanuel or Emmanuel? Let's go with Jumanuel.
I like Jumanuel.
Jumanuel. So where did Jumanuel go for those 40 days and 40 nights? The Talmud says that Jumanuel, aka Jesus Christ, was actually cruising around the stars on a UFO, learning the way of the universe. That's a
Silver
rad
foot.
fucking month.
Yeah, so like, sometimes it's nice to be Jesus.
Sometimes
You just gotta ride along.
Writer, he doesn't just have the Talmud of Jumanuel to back this up. Following his discovery, Asket, remember Asket, the Yara and Handler, took Billy back in time to meet sense to me or you. But Billy actually, he doesn't know how it works.
See, it's not about, you can't have the details so the guy who's the front man. Fucking David Lee Roth doesn't know how to speak this word. The piece of the doctor.
Yeah, because if Billy did know how it works,
He'd be all way down the fucking bullshit all day long.
no, dude, he'd get kidnapped. He'd get kidnapped and forced to use his time travel knowledge for evil rather than good.
Rather than good.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
ignorance is saving you.
Oh yeah, I mean it's plausible deniability, man. You know all that.
Of course.
Always be like, what? With whom?
With what?
Where?
I always say that if someone's about to tell me important information, I say, whoa, 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 whoa! Plausible deniability is hell to Henry.
I love secrets. He said too that he wasn't really responsible. He was very responsible about time travel because he said that he'll talk about going in the past where he hung out with dinosaurs, but he won't talk about the future because he doesn't want people to know about how there's a difference between prophecy and prediction.
Is it because he didn't read a book about the future? We don't know what it's going to look like yet, so it won't be accurate?
No way! He said there's a difference between prediction and prophecy. Prophecy is this idea that you don't want to tell people what could be happening in the future because prophecy is still in a flux state that possibly we can change what's going on, especially if it's really bad, like World War III or Super AIDS. Super AIDS. And then he does say though predictions are solid and are going to happen, and there's no point in telling people what's definitely going to happen because then you're just going to make people all sad.
So, after the meeting with Emmanuel, Billy left the Middle East and spent a year in India where he took his first photographs of Gagarin spaceships, or as they call them, beam ships.
As he calls them beam ships, and you know why? Billy Edward Albert Meyer.
Billy Edward Albert Meyer.
Is it Albert?
All I know
Is it Angus?
It's not A.
Yeah.
So, Billy Edward Albert Meyer.
He named the spaceships after himself.
Billy, I want to believe you, Billy. Just give me one reason to.
Beam. They called me Beam.
It's because they're beam ships, and they wouldn't be called the beam ships if it wasn't for me to fight.
Okay. The beam ships, which actually kind of works. It's a
It
good
does kind
acronym.
of work. I mean, Henry, what did he do in India? Did he do anything besides just take some fuzzy pictures there?
She showed up at an ashram in India when he told them, they called him the spaceman. We'd come in and he said that he was talking to aliens.
And by the way, they called him the spaceman. He's a Swedish dude dressed as a cowboy.
Yes, so that is what you want.
He is dressed like an alien trying to fit in.
You will literally find 5 of those guys in a hostel in Midtown, New York.
Oh, totally. They're like, I mean, if you were an alien and you're coming to Earth, you choose an accent, you choose a look, and you choose an outfit. I mean, he just looks like, we're going with the Swiss accent, we're going to be a man, he's going to be straight, he's going to dress like a cowboy.
He literally just threw darts at a
There's
wheel
no
of
way they're not going to think he's a humanoid.
He went to the ashram and that was where he started taking pictures of UFOs. That is the one thing that Billy Meyer is incredibly famous for. If you have gotten this far and know anything about Billy Meyer, famous for his actual footage of these beam ships. And so we started in India, and they're all very fuzzy, and it is very spicy.
It is spicy, but I did watch some of those videos. Now, when it comes to alien footage, there isn't much good stuff out there. They're not horrible, right?
They're completely fake.
Now, how did he think?
A guy named Phil Langdon did all of them again on his YouTube page. He just went to literally their videos. It is a piece of spruce that is put far away from the camera, and then another tiny little airplane thing. He put it on like a wire, so it was a hard pendulum type thing, and he kind of spun it around a tiny little tree. He's like, what's his name? Alec Baldwin and Beetlejuice.
So, the whole India thing, that as far as I can tell, we took the picture of it, is the last contact that Billy would have with the Yarans for 11 years. Do we know why the break happened?
Here's what happens. Somewhere during this time period, he was on a bus leaving India, going to Cleveland.
I feel like that's exactly where you go on a bus.
And how he says is that he was like, it was a warm day. All I want to do feel, would you be right if my hen was a cow? And he stuck his bad at this accent.
Good accent.
He stuck his hand out of a bus, and apparently a drunk driver across from him on another bus who was driving that bus who was hammered, slammed his bus. The bus flipped, and he lost his arm in the accident. And then apparently he was wandering the desert for months.
Without the hand.
Without arm and stuff like that. He said he was delirious. And he said this thing on his documentary I watched called, I believe it was called The Silent Revolution of Truth from UFO TV. And he talked about how he's like, You cannot face your regrets, and you're going to do actions that are going to be against your nature, but you're supposed to learn from them. Alluding to he did fucked up shit.
Yeah, he did horrible things without a hand, which makes him more horrifying entirely.
Think about how good at fiddling you gotta be fiddling out. He didn't do anything.
He was just doing criminal activity to get by.
It seemed like he was just standing around, but I think that's what he did for forever. I think that he was a low-level criminal for a long time. I think we're looking at sort of like the UFO version of Charles Manson.
Yeah.
Where he's a guy who lived on a lie. He married a woman named Calliope that he met. And he said, because every alien in the world that he was talking to said that he was going to meet this woman named Calliope, they were going to get married, and they were going to give birth to the next generation of philosophers or some bullshit. And this was going to be a love that lasted a lifetime. They got divorced 10 years later because he was beating her.
He's not a good person.
No.
I learned Billy Myers isn't a good person. I was on his side. I'm not against him.
No, Billy Myers is a real big piece of shit. We're gonna get more into that.
Well, let's get into
So
it.
9 years later, in 1975, 9 years after he married Calliope, the yards came back into Billy's life for good.
Now, it seems like they came back into his life just because, like, he found a way to make money on it.
Yeah, that and also kind of coincided with his divorce just a little bit. Yeah, he had this, suddenly had a lot more time on his hands.
This dude's a schizo, right?
So on January 28, 1975, Billy was visited by an extraterrestrial named Simjasi.
Majority.
Majority.
Simjase, who was the granddaughter of Billy's first handler, Spat.
And he was quite a handful.
And along with Simjase came Ptah, Zlaya, and Quetzal, who claimed that he was also the famed Quetzalcoatl of Aztec.
And the name Sherlock, who said that he was of the famed Sherlock Holmes.
Oh,
Which is sort of like
Yeah, and over the years, Billy would meet Indian alien whose names would increasingly get more and more bizarre as time went on, as if he was running out of stuff to tell people who couldn't come up with anything.
I love
It
these
sounds like he was just rhyming the food that he was eating.
Yeah.
That still sounds like
That's
pretzel.
all the guys who let me know whatever food's around.
Yeah, you're gonna be Omato.
In addition to all of those, there was Andron, Zeltan, the spirit guides Melchora, Orlana, and Jasoan. There was Betanica, Nefertisa, Cladina A. Karim, Zerula, Zeruel, Zeruala, Zealadon, and Zapentakbenes.
They all sound like prescription drugs.
Those were throughout the years, and they really did, as they went on and on and on, they got weirder and weirder and weirder.
It's gotta be a very stressful morning. He wakes up and I gotta come up with a new fake name every damn day.
You know, since, again, like a cult leader, he has to continue the storyline, or else he's not gonna be able to sell more stuff. You know, to keep people in a circle. So in 1975, that's when this man named Wendell Stevens showed up and said,